Accusations have been leveled by the Philippines, asserting that the China Coast Guard employed water cannons against their own boats. The Philippines condemned China's Coast Guard on Sunday for firing water cannon at its vessels in the disputed South China Sea handout. On Sunday, the Philippines voiced strong condemnation against China's Coast Guard for deploying water cannon against its vessels in the disputed South China Sea. This action was characterized by the Philippines as both illegal and hazardous. In response, China stated that it had taken essential measures against Philippine boats that it deemed had unlawfully entered its territorial waters. Beijing asserts its sovereignty over a substantial portion of the South China Sea, a crucial channel for trillions of dollars in global trade each year. Remarkably, China has chosen to ignore a 2016 international court ruling that invalidated its territorial claims. The most recent incident occurred as the Philippine Coast Guard was escorting vessels transporting supplies including food, water, fuel, and other necessities for Filipino military personnel stationed at Second Thomas Shoal in the Spratly Islands. The U.S. State Department criticized China's actions, highlighting that both its Coast Guard and maritime militia were involved, actions that directly jeopardize regional peace and stability. Second Thomas Shoal is located approximately 200 kilometers (124 miles) from the Philippine island of Palawan and over 1,000 kilometers from China's nearest major landmass, Hainan Island. China's Coast Guard and Navy vessels routinely obstruct or shadow Philippine ships patrolling the disputed waters, according to Manila's claims. The incident on Saturday marked the first use of water cannon by the Chinese Coast Guard against a Philippine resupply mission to Second Thomas Shoal since November 2021. The Philippine Coast Guard PCG vehemently condemns the China Coast Guard's CCG unsafe maneuvers and illicit utilization of water cannons against the PCG vessels. The Philippine Coast Guard stated, "Such actions by the CCG not only ignore the safety of the PCG crew and the supply boats but also breach international law." The Philippine Armed Forces reported that China's Coast Guard had blocked and water cannoned one of its chartered resupply vessels. Due to these excessive and aggressive actions, a second chartered vessel was unable to unload its cargo for the regular transportation and resupply operation. The British, Australian, and European Union embassies expressed concern. The Japanese envoy in Manila deemed the incident totally unacceptable, while the Canadian mission unreservedly condemns the dangerous and provocative actions of the Chinese Coast Guard. China Coast Guard spokesperson Gan Yu in Beijing remarked, "To repair ships and to Coast Guard ships from the Philippines illegally intruded into waters in China's non-Shaw Islands." Beijing maintained that it implemented necessary controls in accordance with the law and stopped Philippine ships carrying illegal building materials. In response, the Philippine Foreign Ministry asserted that the Southeast Asian nation exercised its sovereign rights over the shoal, which falls within its exclusive economic zone. Tensions between Manila and Beijing have a long history of maritime disputes over the South China Sea. While former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte sought to foster closer ties with China for economic reasons, the current President Ferdinand Marcos has taken a different stance, prioritizing defense ties with the United States to protect the country's maritime rights. This year, tensions escalated between Manila and Beijing when a Chinese Coast Guard vessel reportedly used a military-grade laser against a Philippine Coast Guard boat near Second Thomas Shoal. China accused the Philippine vessel of intruding into its sovereign waters without authorization. After China occupied Mischief Reef in the mid-1990s, the Philippines intentionally grounded a derelict Navy vessel near the shoal to assert its territorial claims in the region, where members of the Philippine Marines are stationed. In another incident in April, a Chinese Coast Guard ship intercepted the Philippine patrol vessel Malapascue as it carried journalists near Second Thomas Shoal.
When will the nations finally take a firm stand against China? Years of mere goodwill and empty rhetoric have proven ineffective. Had the preceding U.S. presidents fulfilled their responsibilities, China wouldn't have had the opportunity to establish those bases in the Pacific. The South China Sea, or the East Asian Ocean, is not China's rightful domain. Unfortunately, no one appears willing to directly challenge their vessels. This parallels the situation with the nations in the Middle East. There's a lot of talk, bluster, and promises, but little actual action or resolution. As a retired veteran, I'd rather be remembered for fighting valiantly than succumbing to fear.
This is precisely why placing trust in the Chinese is a complex matter. While they use charm to cultivate favorable relationships with others, the truth remains that their motives are far from benevolent. They harbor a concealed agenda to establish dominion over the Southeast Asia and East Asia regions. Their ambition knows no bounds. They are determined to attain complete hegemonic control over these areas initially, with ambitions to later expand into the Pacific and Indian Ocean regions. They anticipate subjugating other countries to their will, similar to vassal states, transforming the landscape into one of imperial China. Such a scenario must be prevented at all costs. Allied nations must unite and actively oppose China's overbearing aspirations.
China's behavior within ASEAN reveals a pattern of bullying towards smaller nations, particularly through the assertion of their fictitious 11-line. However, this claim holds no credibility within the global community. China's intention seems to be to mislead the world into believing that the South China Sea rightfully belongs to them. UNCLOS, on the other hand, clearly delineates the rights regarding the Spratly Islands. In this context, China can be seen as acting like a pirate, causing disruptions within international waters and creating unnecessary conflicts.
China's actions often contradict their words, showcasing the principle that actions speak louder. Their lack of trustworthiness is clear, which is why nations worldwide should exercise caution when dealing with them. Their products are manufactured using notably inferior materials, reflecting their character, and this is unsurprising given their communist ideology, devoid of any higher values, but driven by avarice. The Philippines should exhibit resilience and a stance of deterrence. If they respond with water cannons, they should consider using stronger measures like employing stingers in the future. The Philippines should openly welcome more assistance from U.S. naval ships to reinforce their fleet. It might be necessary to expel Chinese diplomats from the Philippines and explore the deployment of high-power microwaves in the region, or even consider sinking the maritime militia vessels. There is a widespread sentiment of discontent towards the Chinese.
China would never risk taking such action against a U.S. Navy vessel. Their actions are primarily directed at smaller targets like Philippine and Vietnamese fishing boats, intended to create an illusion of naval strength. China has a history of annexing territories from neighboring countries such as Japan, Tibet, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and more, all while denying these actions and disregarding international court decisions. It's a sad and insatiable display.
Due to its inability to adequately support its population, China seeks to encroach upon the territorial waters of other nations. Their fragile foundation will eventually lead to the disintegration of the military islands, causing them to vanish into the sea. Their economy is currently facing a decline.
Engaging in further discussions with this unscrupulous nation would be unwise. While the Chinese government may appear conciliatory in their diplomatic statements, their actions speak an entirely different language. It's crucial not to place trust in them under any circumstances.
Who's a threat to peace in the Pacific? You won't ever see U.S. warship or plane doing what China frequently does while claiming peace and stability in the region. China is doing what they do best in the South Sea, still bullying their smaller neighbors. They also deploy militia boats pretending to be fishermen, and they will ram other countries' fishing boats.
Reporting from Sky Agency Network. This is Sky Phoenix from the friendly people, beautiful country of the Philippines.